Good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you along to the third in our People series. And I'm delighted to be joined again this morning by Tim Brown. It's great to be able to host these events in conjunction with Tourism Northern Ireland. And this morning, Tim is going to talk about re-energising things. Very important as we move towards opening, and it'll also help you maximise your business opportunities. Tim will talk now for about the next 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have questions at the end, and we look forward to seeing you then. Over to you, Tim.
Good morning and thank you, Janice. Yeah, this is the third of the seminars. If you want to go back and look at the other two, they'll be available on the website. But this one is about re-energizing the team. I'm excited about this one, if nothing more than, well, I've had a real varied background. I've run restaurants, bars, kitchens, recruitment, sales, retail, parks, leisure around the world. And my favorite place, I think, is probably in a kitchen or a restaurant, working in and around people. And when I get the opportunity to work with companies when they are mobilizing, to have that, to see that excitement in the team is just what gives me the energy anyway. So I want to go through today's session and talk about that energy. And I don't know how you've been coping as maybe a manager or an owner. But one of the things I always think about is when I meet people, I come across three different groups of people in a business. We have your technicians, we have your managers, and we have your entrepreneurs. The technicians do a job, the managers know how to do a job, and the entrepreneurs find new ways to do jobs. Technicians don't tend to like managers because they keep telling them what to do, and technicians don't tend to like entrepreneurs because they keep changing it. Technicians get frustrated. Sometimes they get so frustrated they're going to do one of three things. One of the first things they do is they might leave. They think they can do a better job themselves, so they start their own business. And at the beginning, the business is very successful, and then they have to hire somebody. But of course, unfortunately, they don't trust the new person because they're not them, and unfortunately, they don't always know how to explain to them what to do, because just because it's in their head doesn't mean it's going to be in somebody else's. They unfortunately also don't have the energy and enthusiasm to maintain long-term business, and eventually sometimes the business fails accordingly. If they don't leave and start their own business, then they might still exist in the organization, where they might just do nothing and sabotage the team. Or, and I know it would never happen in hospitality, sometimes they get promoted to be managers. Um, I come across lots of managers in our business that are just really good technicians, and that's no disrespect to them, but of course that's what we're good at. We're good at being with people, with food, with hospitality, whichever the department you work in, and we really would rather be as a technician. In your organization, you have to be all three. You have to do the job, you have to be the manager, and you have to be the entrepreneur. I think the head chef has got the most greatest easy visual representation of this, because when he's standing there chopping broccoli with his hat on, he's going to be the technician. When he is standing there with a clipboard with his hat under his arm doing a staff briefing or menu briefing, he's going to be the manager. And when he's down a pub with a back of a packet of bags writing down his menu for tomorrow, he's being the entrepreneur. So it's a very visual representation of being all three. And often in different positions, you don't have that privilege of having that different outfit or the different change, so the team know which one you're being at any one time. But I guess, and the reason I mention this is you cannot wait to be a technician. And for those of you who are opening tomorrow, that's going to be one of the most exciting things you can be, suddenly being faced with guests. And obviously some of you, just based on that, you're going to be earning some money out of it. So over the last few months, it's been really hard because you've been having to take a step back and not maybe interact, do the technician job that you've always loved. You've had to sit there and wonder, be the manager, and be worried about the finances and how we're going to move forward. I think we've obviously had a few weeks over here, and I thought I'd share a quick story of my neighbour who she works for IHG, and she went out to had an afternoon tea at a local restaurant, and she came back and she said, "I really hope people are doing it better elsewhere." So she waited 45 minutes for her first drink, and I think she'd waited 20 minutes to order it, and then another 25 minutes to actually receive it. The food arrived close to half an hour before their booking was due to be the time slot they'd been given. And within 5 minutes of the time slot, somebody then came up and offered them the second drink. And she then asked, have I got time to have it? Because I don't want to order it and then wait for another 25 minutes and be told to leave. Her feedback to me was, I don't know how much you've eaten out, and I've had mixed experiences, but hers was one of definite of, there's money to be made out there, because she wanted to spend more money. Don't try and get too many people in. Try and get the people you've got in, and maximize that. And that's going to be possibly a staffing and a training, and we're going to talk about some of that throughout this session. So what have we got in line for today? Well, this session is about, initially, it's going to be about redeployment. What are you doing to make sure you have the right teams, or the teams are getting it right? Refocused, how does a team know that they are winning? And finally, reward, are you giving the team what they need? So, redeploying your people. Now, obviously, in any one moment in time, you probably do have some form of recruitment, retention, and development plan. Or at least I hope you do. But I thought what I'd do is I'd just maybe look at what I think are some of the key things that you need to have in place right now to make sure that everything is going to go as easy and as hopefully smoothly as possible. So here are the key steps I thought we could throw in for this morning session to start with. What is your immediate plan? First of all, be the place to be. We mentioned this in our first of our seminars about knowing what your identity is. Are you the employer of choice in the area? What is it that you do that makes you stand out? And how are you communicating that through social media, through the advertising agencies, to make sure that the people who are out there looking for employment, and there are plenty of them, believe it or not, because there's a large number of unemployed due to other industries not hiring, we are now looking at hiring lots of people. And so are you the place that people want to be? And that's, again, reminding yourself of your identity. And the second one is hire for attitude. It is so tempting just to hire somebody who's worked in our industry because you think that they can slot straight into place. I remember working in a pub and being told by my manager he'd never hire anybody with more than 3 months experience. I asked him why, and he said it's because they know how to steal, which was a little bit cynical, but maybe a bit truthful. I don't mean don't hire people who haven't had experience from that point of view, but I think it's more about the idea of be open-minded about where the people are coming from. And I write here, hire for attitude. The second part of that would obviously be hire for attitude, train for competence. What we've done in the past, we used to hire people for their competence and then sack them for their attitude. And if we can get their attitude right, then I think it's a really key way of making sure that we can make it easier. I use what's called the SWAN approach to recruitment, with S standing for smart. Have they made an effort when they turn up? Which probably means they have, and they've maybe got something up there, and are possibly smart there too. But are they smart? Have they made an effort? Do they have anything up here? Which is obviously a bonus. W stands for willing. Do they have a representation or a reference that demonstrates that they are willing to work? Do they want to come in for a trial? What do they want to commit to you? Do they have any testimonials that they've been willing to work in the past, and what that might look like? So W is willing. A stands for ambition. You think it might stand for attitude? No, it stands for ambition. I don't mind if somebody wants to be a kitchen porter for the whole of their life. I just want them to want to be a better kitchen porter tomorrow than they were today. And I think that if we can go through and look at what is driving our teams, what is driving our people, then we might actually be able to hire some really good, ambitious people. I often when I do mobilizations, I'll have a group of people in the room, and I say, how many of you are here because this is the career you've chosen to be in? And half the hands will go up. And they say, so how many of you are here because it's paying for the career that you've chosen to be in, such that they're students? And the other half aren't sure whether they should put their hands up or not. So I then say, I don't mind whether you stay here for a month, 6 months, or a year. I just want you to respect the time that you're here, because this will be the greatest education you'll ever get. I remember one session I picked one of the delegates out, and I said, what are you studying? And she said she's studying to be a midwife. And I said, that's amazing. I said, so what are the core competencies, not knowledge, but what will be the core competencies that you will need on a ward? We had a discussion: teamwork, problem solving, listening skills, communication skills. And we at the end of the day, she's not going to learn that at college. She's going to learn that in a restaurant, especially a new restaurant, when everything is going right or wrong, and she's having to muddle up and muddle in and get the job done. And I don't know whether or not we sell ourselves as much as we could do in order for our people to understand the skills or the competencies that they will be getting out of our industry. And again, whilst we may not think we've got time to explain all of that, I think if we can get that buy-in from people maybe not who haven't had our industry background, who maybe aren't particularly trained in hospitality and we can get them to work with us, then we are hiring for attitude. And the N, by the way, N stands for nice, because it's pretty easy to make somebody nice do anything, but it's pretty impossible to make somebody be nice. So the SWAN approach to recruitment to me is a methodology to enable us to think clearly and quickly around the people we're hiring. Um, the third stage, give people a chance. I know that's like a novel idea. Many years ago, my iPhone was broken. I went to the Genius Bar at Apple, and I went to the Genius Bar in the Apple in Covent Garden. The Covent Garden Apple Store is humongous, and I happened to be dealt with by the training manager with my phone. So I was like, oh, I was asking him lots and lots of questions. So this huge shop hires 1,500 staff. They never have less than 250 staff on the shop floor at any one time. They have a 4-week induction program, including personal profiling and such like. For every week they work, they have 2.5 hours off-site training, and for every 5 weeks they work, they have 1 week off-site training. And I said to the guy, I said, this is incredible. I said, where do you get your standards from? And he said, well, the best there is. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, 5-star hotels. Now, I've worked with 5-star hotels, and I know that some of their induction courses looked like, here's your uniform, go and do the job. Not yours, I appreciate, but you know the hotels I'm talking about. And so what is your induction course? Give them a chance, buddy them up. Just going back very quickly to Apple, that whole mentality around hospitality is so ingrained that whenever you go into an Apple store, the member staff who has the iPad and registers you in as you go in, their job title is concierge. It's as simple as that. And how are they thinking about the experience will be no different to us. So give your guys a chance. And of course, if you think about your first day, your first minute as all that first impression to your member staff as it would be to your guest. So make sure you're maximizing the opportunity to get that staff to buy into you and that you are the place, going back to stage number 1, that people want to be. Manage expectations. I talk about this gap theory, and life is a constant mismatch of expectations. What are their expectations? Because if you don't know theirs, you can't deliver it. And of course, they need to know yours. And just because it's in your head doesn't mean it's going to be in theirs. You've been doing this for years. It doesn't mean that they suddenly will understand and know that straight away. It's about the time you spend with them, as I say, budding them up, put them in smaller clusters, smaller groups, so they're supporting each other to make sure that the expectations of both the guest and obviously them as individual staff are being met. And the final one for me is communication. However you set that, whether you have one-to-ones, PDR, review, appraisals, make sure you're keeping to that. And I know that life is going to be huge over the next few weeks and months with everything being so busy. You need to take the time to stop and speak to your team before you lose them, because they will have their own airs and own concerns. We talked about mental health in the previous sessions. You need to make sure that they're being looked after. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be done by you. Make sure that you have a system and a hierarchy allowing your supervisors and your managers to do that as well. Otherwise, you will feel it's just you doing everything, and you just simply just can't do that. So redeploying staff is a crucial way of thinking about how can I get people on the shop floor as quickly as possible. I'll talk about some activities later on that we can do, and post these sessions there'll be some handouts that you can pick up together with the slides that will just have an exercise on each one of these just to get you thinking about what you can either do as a manager or with the team to carry the training forward. So if it's not about reemploying your people, rather, it's also going to be around how you focusing the team. The team will have, who knows where they've been. They would have been spending time on Xbox or furlough or walking the dogs, shopping for the shielding. Who knows what they've been up to? So how can we refocus the team to make sure that they feel that they are now engaged and have a sense of purpose and are aligned with what you're trying to achieve? So I always like this idea of how do you know you're winning? So I'm going to share with you a tool I use with businesses. I stole it from somebody else. In 2003, Sir Clive Woodward won the, or he didn't, but the team won the World Cup at rugby. And he wrote a book called Winning. Of all the books I might have on the bookshelf behind me, Winning is one of my favorite. Although it is about rugby, it is also a business book. I always think of Sir Clive as being the manager entrepreneur rather than your Andy Robinson, who was a technician. So it's how, even in sport management, you can still think about the mentality of how you run things, which is one of the reasons why Sir Clive always, as a businessman, looked at the English team as such a thing. So these are his definitions of how you know you're winning. And I go through with a team because whilst they're written about rugby, as we speak now, you will now think of it, and I'll help you think about it. What does it look like in the context of business? Because to me, it's exactly the same. So number one, how do you know you're winning? You have more points on the scoreboard. Well, that's obvious, but what does that look like in a hotel or restaurant or bar? That's straightforward. It's simple. It is cash in the till, money in the bank, more points on the scoreboard. It's equal to profit. At the end of the day, that is what you're in business for. In the same way, when you're playing a sport, that is the goal, to have more points on the scoreboard. The second one is a performance of world-class standards in the core areas of the game. The two key areas I take out of that are class standards and core areas. So world-class standards, what are your standards? Do you have a manual? Those are going to be changing or shifting with COVID. Do your team know what those standards are? And of course, the core areas of the game. Where are the key interactions in the business that enable your team to perform at their highest? On a rugby field, it might be the line out or the penalty or the scrum. But in our business, it might be the reception, the check-in, the presentation, the walk through to the room, the opening of the doors, the performance of showing the room. It might be the charismatic waiter showing the wine. These interactions are core areas to enable the guest to feel that they are valued and are special. So performance of world-class standards in the core areas of the game. The next one is a team that really clicks in the heat of the match. That doesn't even need translating. In our business, it is exactly the same. I mean, it might be when something hits the fan, that might be the language we use rather than the heat of the match. But that might be when the coach party arrives and they all pile into reception. That's when everybody needs to work together. It might be will be tomorrow when the doors open for the first time. How will the team interact to ensure that when things are under pressure, you can work well? Do you have that team, and do they know what the expectations are? Real competition against a team you know you can beat. I always think of this one as being your competitive analysis. Who are your competitors? Do you know what they are delivering, and how are you matching or comparing yourself to that? And in some ways, there are lots of KPIs you can look at, but it's more than just that. And who are your competitors? Several years ago, I had the opportunity, I was doing all the sales training for Porsche. And when I was interviewed for the position to do the training, they said, we are a bit concerned because you don't actually have a motor trade background. And I said, well, who are your competitors? And they, wheeled off, saying Mercedes or McLaren or Ferrari. And I said, so do your customers frequent the dealerships so often that their level of expectation that for you is being set by those centers? Or is their level of expectation being set by the environments or the contexts that are equivalent to yours that they frequent on a regular basis? That could be the Savoy Hotel, it could be Harvey Nichols at the shop, it could be a Waitrose at the supermarket. And I say I ask that because these people are my clients. So whilst I may not have had 20 years of experience of Mercedes, I'm possibly better qualified because I'm used to delivering and understanding the standards are expected from these people and these clients at a higher level. So look at other industries and the service levels of what their standards they're delivering, and thinking, how do I compete with that as well as just room rates and quality of the burger, whatever it might be that you're delivering. Think about the actual standards of your competitors. The other thing is, who should go out and assess your competitors? I was working with one company, we had an employee of the month, and what we did for the employee of the month, we gave them some money and they went out, it was a restaurant, so they went out to have a meal at a competitor's restaurant. So they thought it was a reward, but in fact it was an opportunity for them to then come back, and part of the reward was they came back and did a presentation to the rest of the team about what they enjoyed, what we could improve, what could be improved, and how and what made it special to enable us to understand the competition better. So the really simple way of rewarding and getting a better competitive analysis. It shouldn't just come from the management, it should come from the team as well, because they're the ones who are delivering it on a day-to-day basis. An experience off the pitch that is enjoyable and inspires a whole organization. I like the fact that Clive didn't just look at what was important on the pitch, it was off the pitch as well. There was a lovely phrase that he didn't coin it, but he used it. It was called critical non-essentials. And it was all the things that should make no difference, but could make a difference. So when he turned up, the teams were staying in twin room, 3-star accommodation. Now, should that make a difference on the pitch? It shouldn't, but it could. So he looked at all the things, all the critical non-essentials. The consultant they had come in noticed that when Pete Sampras was losing a tennis match, he changed his shirt. And the English rugby team was the first rugby team in the world to change their shirt at half time. So not only did it make them feel fresher, it made the opposition look at somebody who was looking fresher. So therefore, they had a different mentality to the game. The actual expression came from a dentist in Brisbane, Australia, called Paddy Lund. Paddy Lund has the coined expression. Dentists apparently have the highest suicide rate of any profession, something about pain inflection. He was going through a bout of depression and knew how to change it. So he got the sign off the door that said dentist practice, and he changed it to one that said invitation only. He wanted people who he liked and who were going to pay him. Fair enough. He didn't like the smell of anesthesia in the surgery, so he went out and spent 5,000 Australian dollars on a Gaggian machine, and of course Gaggian made coffee. And he said that customers, he said, don't value your business on what you think is important. They judge it on what they find important. So not one of his customers ever commented on the £500,000 or dollar X-ray machine that was used, but nearly every customer left saying, great coffee. So what are the things that you are doing, both from an employee and also from a service point of view, to make sure that you are delivering at that level? And making sure that your staff feel that the experience off the pitch, and to me that is one of how well are they socialized together, what are they doing, is a place that people want to be. The next one, of course, is all about customer service. 75,000 people on their feet going nuts, a performance your supporters can wildly applaud. And so each one of these deals with different areas of the business. And so obviously from our point of view, that's going to be how we have our customer feedback. That might be through different mechanisms. But are our customers loving what we're doing, or are we just trying to do what we think is important? And I think the most important one on here is knowing you can do it on a consistent basis. Without that, the rest of them just don't fall into line. So why is any of this important? Well, if I realign these slightly and group them together, we then go back to, I think, the 4 key areas we should know we're winning in. And of course, most people will be focusing on winning at the first level, points on the scoreboard. But it's the other areas of the business or the profit chain that need to be covered. So what are they? Profit, guest satisfaction, standards, and employee engagement. And the reason I like Supply's list so well is it just fits into these. So do we have any form of knowing that we're winning in any of the rest of these criteria or categories? Some of you will, some of you won't. A lot of you will be focusing on profit because that's where we've been lacking over the last year. But we also need to make sure that we are focused also on guest satisfaction, the standards we're delivering, and the employment engagement. And therefore, it comes down to the idea of how do you know you're winning? So part of that for me is scoreboarding. Scoreboarding to me is one of the most important aspects. When I'm with a group of people, I'll say to them, if anybody plays sport, anybody watch sports, if you turn on the television and you watch and there's football on, first place you look is top left-hand side, you're looking for the score. And often it's because you want to become emotionally engaged in the performance. You want to become emotionally engaged in the game to know, is it worth me watching it or not watching it? I find one of the most frustrating things is when you get into a car and there's a sport on and a radio, and you're just desperate to find out what the score is. I mean, they're telling you what's going on in the game, and so-and-so's been passing the ball, but they won't tell you the score, and maybe you ask your partner to Google it to try and find out, because it's one of the most frustrating things of going, what's happening? What's happening? So you have a team who are playing your game every single day. So my question is, what is on your scoreboard? Do you have a scoreboard? If you don't have a scoreboard, how do your team know they're winning? And I think it's crucial to think about that in regards to having some form of ownership and to have some form of focus for the team. When it comes to the scoreboard, what are the things you can do? Well, of course, it depends again on each of the 4 areas of the profit chain. So obviously from profit, you're going to have net or gross profit or margins. You're going to have sales per shift, that's average spend per head, or how many comps have you given out that night? Because sometimes it's not just about uh, gaining money, sometimes it's about saving money. So obviously you want to lower your comps, you want to lower your wastage, maybe even use sharing things like occupancy, RevPAR, what your tips have been. Make them relevant for the team and let them come up with what's going to be on the scoreboard so they can be interested. Guest satisfaction, that might be your TripAdvisor or whatever metrics you use to align or amalgamate all of the service data. Your guest comments, mentioned staff. I've known companies that have a bar chart and how many people's names have been mentioned on a day-to-day basis, how much return bookings, word of mouth referrals, how are you collecting that data to make sure that you know what people are, how they have they heard about you, so you can therefore start scoring that. Standards, you're going to have mystery shop, daily checks, hygiene, star ratings, schedules completed, etc. When I talk about standards, one of my favorite things is actually you may do a daily check as a manager. In my opinion, give the daily check to a member of the team. Let them be responsible for going through the business on a day-to-day basis. You know, like Jack's turn today. He goes around with a clipboard and, you know, are all the name tags in the right place? And, you know, is there all a hand sanitizer full? And and get them to do it. A couple of reasons. One, because it empowers them. Secondly, it means it teaches them what the standards are because they may not have been listening in the first place. Thirdly, the next day when it's not there, they are likely to remember it because they don't want to be told off. And I suppose, and fourthly, they're more likely to be lenient with the team, not by letting them get away with it, but by saying there should be a hand sanitizer, quickly put it in, I can tick you off. So everybody is self-learning rather than you trying to look at it as a penalty. It's actually a development program. And then, of course, employment engagement. You know, are you measuring sick days, retention rates, engagement rates, referral schemes? However, you are measuring that to make sure that you have some form of balanced scorecard or dashboard or KPIs, not just for profit, but for guest satisfaction, standards, and employment engagement. One of the things that I think is really important is thinking about how you come up with these. Some of you might have heard of 4DX thinking or the 4 disciplines of execution. And there are 4 simple keys that are really nice ways of coming up with scoreboards. Step number 1 is, what are your WIGs, or what are your wildly important goals? So what's important now, or however you label that. Pick 1, 2, 3, or 4 very simple goals for the departments. Don't overload them with lots of information. And I think, you know, I don't always like the analogy, but in the book he refers to the idea that wars are won in key battles. So where are the key battles in your business? If you were to deliver that, everything else would be bigger. You know, I know sometimes people focus on tips because, you know, if tips are a representation of sales, it obviously has a huge impact on the individual, and therefore relevant to them. So therefore, if you were to measure and have some form of scoring system, make it visual, to make sure that that you can allocate or understand where your tips are going, or where the tips are being received from, then you'll also make sure that you need to sell more food or drinks in order to get that tip level up, especially if you're working on a percentage. And one of the most simple ways of defining your goals is to say, we want to improve X to Y by when. You know, you might say, we want to have an average spend of £35 per head. And for an individual, that might sound like an awful lot. Whereas if we looked at the figures from previously, maybe that was £30 or £32. So if you stated it, we want to go from £32 to £35 per head by the end of May, that's much easier than saying to a team, we want you to do £35 per head. Because £35 per head is a huge gap between 0 and £35. Whereas actually, if they did nothing else than what they did before, they'd be getting 32. So really all you need to do is do one more side or one more drink, whatever it might be, and that's going to bump that average up. So I like the idea of improving from X to Y by when. It's a simple way of describing it. You're going to have 2 things you're going to measure. You're going to measure your lag, what's been, as well as your lead. So what have you done in the past will be your lag measures, he refers to in the 4 disciplines. And then what your lead measures are all the key activities that are going to drive, for example, that tip level up. That might mean that every guest is going to be asked for a side. Every guest is going to be asked to make sure if they want bread, if it's not included, etc. It might be that every guest, when their glass is this low in the drink, from the drink's point of view in the glass, be offered another one. So all these activities will be the lead measures to enable you to hit that goal. Step number 3 is have a scoreboard. Have a compelling scoreboard, I even say. And as I said, make sure you engage your team in coming up with that scoreboard, because the chances are they're going to have a better idea of what's important to them that's going to drive your business. Because at the end of the day, if you're just worried about the profit, which is fine, make sure you look at the rest of them. But if you're worried about the profit, get the team to own that number so that they can drive it. I've even worked with companies where they've been quite transparent with the P&Ls. And when you speak to a kitchen team and explain to them it costs £400 to fix a dishwasher when they break it, they weren't aware of that. So therefore, they suddenly go, okay, let's have a 0 tolerance on breaking a dishwasher this week. And therefore, you can score it. Know the damage it does if it's broken, or if they have to say, oh, I can't be bothered, we'll get the mechanic out. People are interested. You may not think they are, but they are definitely interested. And part of that is a sense of purpose that we need to give them. That whole cynic question of why am I working makes it important for them. And the final stage. So we have, what are your wide important goals? You have, what are your lag and lead measures? Have a scoreboard, and finally have a cadence of accountability, which is a big word for who should be in charge of the scoreboard. And of course, who should be in charge? The team should be in charge. In the old days, I might have been the boss, and I might have said to you, look at the scoreboard, it's rubbish. What are you going to do about it? If you make them in charge of the scoreboard, they're more likely to turn around and say, uh-oh, our scoreboard's rubbish. This is what we are going to do about it because we're embarrassed. Let them own it. And I think that's really, really crucial. And that will help refocus the team. So let's talk about rewarding the team. How are you bringing some life back into the workforce? So I've been working with different companies over the last few weeks over here in England with them reopening, and obviously we've got a gap, a larger gap actually between eating outside and then hospitality rooms and inside service. You've got a slightly smaller one in Northern Ireland. And I'm laughing because I play certain games to try and get the energy back up again. And the last group I was with, I had 4 half-day sessions, and the last session was with the chef brigade. So I had this pool of chefs who just didn't want to be there. And I thought, how am I going? I really feel like I should play these games that I've been playing with everybody else because they've been going down so well. And face-to-face training was so unique for me that I thought, I've got to do this. So I thought I'd share a couple of games with you real quick. But when I did it with the chefs, I did it in such a way that made them think about how they're going to have to get back to work. So the first thing is we're going to have to remember, and we have to remind ourselves we're going to have to do some memory stuff. So I gave them a memory game, put them in a circle, and in pairs ask them to talk about what they've been doing during lockdown. And then in those pairs to pick out, maybe give them a minute each way to talk and then listen whilst they're asking. And then each person to pick out for the other person one thing that for them highlights that person's lockdown. It might be they started an allotment. It might be that they learned to play the guitar. It might be they spent all the time on Xbox or watched the entire series on Netflix. Whatever it might be, pick that one thing. So it might be Tom Netflix. And then in the circle, you get one person, the person to walk into the middle, walk towards, let's say Tom, and you'll say Tom Netflix. And now Tom, not Netflix, will then walk into the middle of the circle and then go to Gary Allotment. And Gary Allotment will then come in. And then you start to get them moving around. And then once you've done that a couple of times around, you then maybe have a second person going in. So you have 2 people changing sides. Obviously, be COVID compliant, but it suddenly becomes a great memory game. And believe it or not, I can believe it, the chefs loved it. The other activity I'll often get to do, and I'll do this in pairs or groups of 3 is a good one, and I did this in the idea that you're going to have to do 2 things at once. Simple activity, so there's 3 of you, person A, person B, person C. Person C just watches for the time being. Person A mimes out an activity. let's say, for example, they are pretending to play snooker. Person 2 then says, what are you doing? At which point person A has to say, mowing the lawn, i.e. say something they're not actually doing. Person B now pretends to mow the lawn. Person C says, what are you doing? And he might say, washing the dishes. Person C now starts washing the dishes. Person A goes, what are you doing? He goes, playing darts. He starts playing darts. We, for many of us, have not been doing two things at once for the last year. This is a really quick game and quite brain frizzling to work as quickly as you can to get them to think and do something different at the same time. And the final one, the final game I've been playing, which is so much fun, is called the splat game. Get in a circle, and all you're doing is you're splatting somebody. The two people either side of them, its job is to splat each other. So the person you splatted has to go down. So you're standing there, you splat someone, they go down, the two people either side have to splat. It is a reactionary game, and it is so much fun just watching them get so confused by trying to have an awareness of what's going on and follow instructions. And if English isn't their first language, it is most entertaining. So yeah, as I said, so you splat, person goes down, two people, and if you want to make it competitive, the person who gets splatted because they said it's second, then sits out until eventually the circle gets smaller and smaller, because the person who's gone down now owns a splat and they pass it on. You know, at the end of these other sessions, people will be saying, you know, are there any activities? There's three really simple activities to highlight memory, to highlight reaction time, and to highlight the ability to do two things at once. And I think those are some key things you're going to have to do. So what else is important? Well, in the first session, I mentioned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I think when it comes to rewarding the team, it's going to be really important for you to focus on where the people have been for the last year and where they need to be in the future. So Maslow talked about hierarchy of needs and what's important to us from a community point of view and an individual motivation. And as you can see, the bottom two levels, psychological needs, air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction, and safety, personal security, employment, resources, health, and property, that is where we have been for the last year. And that's where our attention has been. Both you as a business, have I got a business? Can I pay as a business? As well as your team, because even if they've been furloughed and they've been doing nothing at home, they've only been on 80%. So some of them will be possibly below their survival level that they've been living on because they've been having no overtime at all. And that's possibly what they survive on. So they might be paying for the rent, but that might be all they're doing. And you hear time and time and again about where people are missing out. And that's from belonging to that community, feeling good about yourself, your esteem, and actually self-actualization and having a sense of purpose. So our job, in my opinion, is to reassure them that they've got the bottom two, that's back to normal, but to start making sure that they do feel they belong, to make sure that they do have that confidence and they do have a sense of purpose. And how do you do that? Very straightforward, by asking them. You cannot manage people without knowing what their expectations are. I've put up an example here. On the crib sheet afterwards, you'll see the questions I'll ask people. But when I interview people, when I meet people, I ask them what's important to you. I need to establish their values. In our first session, we talked about your values as an organization. And I suppose in some ways I'm concluding about finding out your team and individual values. So what are the values? What's important to them about the job they do? Maybe it's fun, work-life balance, teamwork, satisfaction, money, development. You then ask them the priority, put them in order, which is the most important. I put those in order for there as an example. And then the third column rather, is what is the evidence? How would you know you were having fun? Now I've just put one thing in each of that list. And of course, they're not just gonna have one thing. It's a tick box exercise. If people feel that they are having the evidence, then they are having the value. And if they have the value, then they are more likely to work hard and enjoy their jobs. So if they can have a laugh, if they get to pick their shifts, they can like the people they work with. If they're doing that tick box on a day-to-day level, then they're getting the stuff that's in the value column. If they're getting the stuff into the value column, they're performing. And the final one is motivation. Why is it important to them? And of course, some people do things for positive reasons, some people do things for negative reasons. It's the carrot and stick mentality. It's to avoid pain or to gain pleasure. Now, one of the most important things about doing this exercise is you may not be able to meet their expectations. In which case, at the first stage of your recruitment, then you can say, we can't meet that, or how can we compromise to make sure that you're working and in line with what's going on in your life as well. I always love the idea that when we hire somebody, we're very specific and give them a job description that tells them what we expect from them. But what's the bit of paper they give us that tells them what they expect from us? And there isn't one. Well, some people get a letter, it's called a resignation letter, and in that they'll list all the things you didn't do. But how do you know how to manage someone if you don't ask them the question? How do you know their expectations if you don't ask them? You're very specific about what yours are, but we're not always taking the time and inclination to spend the time and asking them what theirs are. You know, life, as I said before, is a constant transference of energy. If people don't feel they're getting back what they're giving, then they will be unhappy. And of course, you know, if we go back to Maslow real quick, they'll be getting their safety and they'll be getting their psychological, but they're also working for self-actualization, esteem, and love and belonging, or in the context of the person I made up before, was fun and development. If they're not getting those things, they will ask for more money because they feel like they're giving more energy. And you have to understand, over the next few weeks, you will be draining them of energy. So how are you rewarding them? By finding out what's important to them, you'll be able to deliver that. So go through that, ask them, whether it be through interview, whether it be through job chats, however it might be, what's important to them, and establish what you can do to reward them from a very personal point of view. So the session, we talked about redeployment. Your team want to help. They're hopefully desperate to be back. Let them help by getting them engaged in the right way and guiding them through that process. Refocus them, empower the team. You can't do it all. Let them come up with a scoreboard that's going to drive you and your business forward. And finally, reward. Your people are important. Without them, you'll have no business. So to re-energize your business, you need to bring the people with you. I hope that's made some sense today. It's some quick key bits there for you to think about. And I'm certain we've got one or two questions. So I'm going to invite Janice back onto the line. And what have we got, Janice? This is when Janice hopefully comes back on.
This is where you're always. This is where you're just always having that moment of extreme fear, where you think, "What is going on here? What is going to happen next? Are there questions? Are there not?" I suppose one of the main questions we have sort of been asked about is the customer side of things. Okay, so how do you really prepare people for that, getting up the level of energy required for them to deal with customers again?
Well, in the experience that I've done so far, as well as getting them to obviously interact and do some team games, most of the people I've worked with so far, the staff have been desperate to be back in front of people. You know, they have missed their sense of purpose and identity for the last 3 months or maybe even a year, and they're so desperate, Janice, to get back in. They're keen. Now, there's going to be uncertainty, and we talked about that in other sessions regarding the environment in which you're preparing them. Someone's phoning up for another question, Janice. That's the hotline to Janice questions. But yes, so I really am a keen believer of the fact that I have to believe it. Create the environment for your team to be back, and they are desperate to get the customers back. And what they do best is they want to give hospitality. They want to be the storytellers. They want to be the experience makers. So whilst you know what do you need to do? Just give them an environment where they feel safe and they know what's going on, and they will do the rest for you.
Okay. And, you know, over the next, we have probably, some people will have a limited service back on Friday. We have between now and the 24th of May. So, you know, what do you think, say I'm sitting down today, and most people will have reached out to their staff in some format or another. What would you do? You know, Monday's a bank holiday. What would you do next week? What would be your 3 top tips for next week?
So number one would be do it slowly, and I think it's really unfair for you that you've got your reopening on a bank holiday, because everyone's just going to be desperate to come and invade it. So if you can gear it up from Saturday, Sunday to Monday, depending on the weather, don't try and be too greedy on Saturday. So give the staff a chance to break themselves in. I would then say on the Tuesday, have a good recap on what's going on, so that you can give that time allocated to see what works and what hasn't worked. And I think the third bit is making sure that the development and the training and the buddy system for moving forward is in line, so that everybody can feel safe and comfortable and competent of how you're going to move forward. Because I think that it's all going to be steered in this review process of how things went, and things are going to have to adapt. But make sure you bring your team with you rather than letting them second guess. I think would be really important.
Okay, that's good to know. And how, and this is a question that's come up a few times, how do you handle somebody who comes back and says, actually, after about a week, this is not for me anymore? What do you do then?
I think that I would love to have thought that you'd have had that conversation with them already. That you would have sat down with them and found out where they're at, where their year's been, be that on an individual basis or in your team sessions, establish their values from that last exercise I went through. And if they do decide that it's not for them, I'm of the belief there's lots of people out there who are desperate for work. So find somebody who does want to be there rather than somebody who doesn't. And part of
Mhm.
that might be somebody who has been spending all their year on Xbox and doesn't actually want to work for a living anymore. And that might be somebody who is still maybe thinking they're having to shield their grandparent because they live with them. Give them time, give them space if they need it. But it's also a case of being quite diligent and going, you know what, I'm completely happy for you not to want to be here. Let me find somebody who does.
Okay, I just want to look at a couple of these other questions. And in the meantime, we normally put up a poll at this stage. So we'll put up a couple of questions on that and get answers to those, so we'll be able to work out what to do with future sessions. The first one should be up now. And there'll be a second one now, and then we'll get back to the questions.
I was going to
Okay.
say one of the interesting things, Janice, is a lot of the things I've been going through over these 3 sessions aren't COVID dependent. They're things that we should be doing generally, not just because of COVID. But I think what's happened with COVID is it's highlighted everything, and it's kind of like a race to get ready, a race to reopen, and trying to grab anything we can. But these things aren't just for COVID. They are for whatever normal times is as well.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose one of the questions that's come up is, and you've sort of touched on it vaguely there, is this an opportunity for you to maybe change things? Is it, should we just view it as, a number of people have said it just feels like reopening my hotel for the first time, or opening my hotel for the first time as opposed to reopening. Should we see that as an opportunity?
I think that anybody who hasn't taken this opportunity has possibly missed out. I found it staggering where people have referred to it as reopening. As you say, for some of them, it is just literally opening a hotel. The staff are some of them are completely new. It's about version 2 or maybe even version 3 for some people who have opened, and that's around what have we always wanted to do? Let's do it now. Let's change our service standards. Let's make it so revolutionary, so different to what we've done before, so that people feel that they can come back to somewhere that is bigger and better and stronger. We've got a different competitive market out there now. People were feeling apprehensive in different ways. They may not always remember what you've done before, so now you have a chance to revisit those procedures and to make it even better. Version 2 or version 3 for definite.
Okay. And how important do you think multi-skilling will be the new buzzword, where, you're a GM and you're running around with your fogging machine and your housekeeper is dusting tables and taking drinks orders? Not being facetious, but, how important do you think multi-skilling is going forward?
I think it has to be the only way forward, and I think this will be an incredible opportunity. We always talk about doing it. We talked about doing it for years and how teams should be better prepared to muck in. I think I said in my first session, your housekeeping teams are now going to be the most important, most visual operators in the hotel. You know, we try to hide them behind perhaps, but now we want them out front because we want to demonstrate to every single one of our guests and to our staff that you're making a difference. And in some ways, people therefore want to join into that. I know I did work with one hotel that had their team were helping redecorate, and so they weren't, you know, some of them weren't put on furlough, some of them were, and before they reopened, everybody was back in doing jobs, and in doing so meant that they were all working with other people that they'd never really worked with. And you could even see that when there was a lunch break, they weren't sitting on separate tables in their departments, they were now sitting with new people in a new way. And I think as we reopen, I think that's going to be the only way forward. I think the idea of getting your team to be better trained and better prepared to work in different areas, to muck in and to work in those small teams, but to be aware of everything around you, has got to be the way forward. It's a great opportunity.
And finally, you'll be relieved to hear, what about, you've touched on simplification. You know, how, particularly maybe within your restaurant or your menu or stuff like that, are there other areas? I mean, one thing we have told people to do is to try and introduce an easier check-in and check-out process. Are there areas that you think that we really can simplify? And a dual, number one, to create kind of an air of confidence, to maybe reduce those pinch points or congestion points in your business, but also maybe to help your staff, or maybe that you will need less unmeaningful staff interaction and more meaningful staff interaction. What do you think about that simplification thing?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a way forward. I know that check-in processes have been changed in different properties. Some of it's being done online. Some of it's, you know, taken away from the front desk and being almost as they're coming into the properties. What's it's doing, you know, you alluded to there, Janice, the conversations you are having will be more meaningful when you have them, allowing you less or more time to get on with doing other things. I know more hotels are now guiding and taking people to their rooms, which does take up staff, but it also gives you more time to explain and demonstrate to the different expectations of the experience you're going to have and what you're going to be doing. You talk about menus. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to reduce. It just means it's more simple. So I think there's an interesting line there. You know, simple doesn't mean less. It just means simple and more sensible.
Thank you. As we've said, Tim has a short kind of, for want of a better word, crib sheet or synopsis of what he's talked about. He is available for funerals, weddings, and bar mitzvahs at a small fee, and I am acting as his agent. But if anybody does want further tips on bringing teams together, please feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to direct you in his direction. We have one seminar left in this series now, which takes place next Wednesday between 11 and 12. And Helen O'Leary will be joining us talking about sales and marketing as well, primarily around this whole idea of the staycation and how this summer's opportunity of having people here, the opportunity is to take them from a one-time customer to a lifetime supporter. A very famous hotel in Ireland, he told his father about the brilliant summer he'd had, and his father told him a customer is never a customer until they've rebooked. So we'll be dealing with that. For those of you who are opening your outdoor spaces this weekend, I wish you the very best. I hope it goes well and I hope that the sun shines. I will be one of your customers. And for the rest of you over the next couple of weeks, if you have any other queries, we'll be happy to answer them. Thank you to the team at Tourism Northern Ireland for supporting us with this. And thank you to Tim for joining us from his library in sunny Southend. And we look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.